then the discussion and the evaluators.
Sure. So first I want to thank all my friends who are coming to this presentation, and I want to thank Maria especially for being my awesome supervisor.
Sure.
This thesis wouldn't have been possible without your guidance, so thank you. So yeah, my topic is design for collaborative minds. And so I begin with the research question. How can visual designers contribute to collaborative consumption services? And the presentation of this thesis will be structured around this question, which is divided into three parts. First is the background, or like what inspired me, what tickled me to come to this research question. The second is the methods, like how do I go about in finding the answers to this question. And third is a conclusion, which is the answer to the research question. So the first part, the background. It all begins with an image. It's a picture that I saw, and when I saw it, it provoked me a sense of wonder, curiosity, or even a little bit of terror. And this is the picture. What you're seeing here is the largest landfill in the world. And the thing is, this landfill is not actually on land. It's in the ocean. It's located somewhere between North America and Japan, and it's about the size of Texas. And if you imagine, like in the middle of this Pacific Ocean, we have a poo-poo size of Texas floating somewhere where nobody can flush it down. So I was thinking, this must cause a lot of environmental problem. And how does this come here, where all this trash come from, and what's going on? So I started doing my research, and then I found out that this is what's going on. Hyperconsumption is a way of living, like throwaway living. Like what you had just presented is basically extension into this, and it's a way of shopping excessively. Hyperconsumption is a system that deliberately turns consumption into society's way of life, converts buying and use of goods into rituals that people seek spiritual satisfaction, ego satisfaction, in consumption. In another word, you are what you buy. And the system wants things to be consumed, to be burned up, to be replaced at a super fast rate. All of this is to generate money, to generate more profits for the corporation. And there are three ways that the corporations get people to, into this hyperconsumption system. The first one is planned obsolescence, which also like what Lee has mentioned earlier, that there are things that are designed to be broken down really, really fast than it should be. For example, light bulb, when it was first invented, it was supposed to last like hundreds and thousands of hours, right? But then the manufacturers, the corporates, they were thinking, if these things last so long, then how are we going to make money? I mean, people would just buy one and then use it forever. So what they do is they lobby the government, and they slowly pass the law that limits the lifespan of the light bulb. So nowadays, incandescent light bulbs last just over 1,000 hours. Or something like this, when you have buy a new MacBook, and you have your old cable, and somehow it doesn't fit, so you just have to throw the old cable away and just have to buy a new one. And this is all this part of the plan. And we have perceived obsolescence, which basically is, there are newer things coming out, and you're like, oh, you feel like, even though what you're having is working fine, like my iPhone is working fine, but you feel like, man, that new thing is amazing, it's faster, it's thinner, it's cooler, I want it. So, you just throw away the old thing and you buy a new one. And the last thing is peer pressure, which basically you're walking around your peers, your friends, your neighbors, and you start seeing they wearing this new collection of Prada handbag. Like, I guess I want that. That's kind of nice. And you want to be in, you don't want to be out. And really, fashion work. This is one of the mechanisms that fashion really used to trick people into buying new things. And the problem is, like, this hyperconsumption makes people unhappy and makes planet unhappy. People are unhappy because they're trapped into this kind of rat race that you want to work harder, to earn more money so you can buy more things, because the happiness is just around the corner. And when you turn it, and once you get the new thing, oh, there's suddenly a newer thing coming out. So you have to keep on this process over and over again. And you know, people work harder, they work longer hours. They don't even have time to actually enjoy the stuff that they buy. And of course, the planet cannot sustain this kind of consumption. Last 30 years alone, we have consumed 1/3 of the natural resources. If you think about human history, we have like more than 50,000 years, and last 30 years alone, we are consuming 1/3 of the world's natural resources. And of course, the planet is starting to show signs of sickness, like climate change and other things, and it's obvious that this is not going to be sustainable, this kind of consumption. And the inconvenient truth that I found out is that, like, we designers, we are kind of part of this thing. We play a role in driving this system forward. You know, like we design, we think like, hey, we are solving the world's problem. We are making making people's life better, improving life. But actually, this is what we do. Basically, we sell stuff. Many of us in the industry, we just doing this. So, and massive consumption is not going away. I mean, we are so used to it. We are used to this comfort. We're used to the luxury. We're used to convenience. And so the question is there an alternative, more sustainable consumption system? And can we designers play a role in driving such system forward instead of hyperconsumption? And the good news is there is, and it's called collaborative consumption. I first know about this term through this book, Was Mine is Yours, which basically became one of my main reference and inspiration in my thesis. It's a wonderful book. If you want to know more about this, you should check it out. And this is what collaborative consumption looks like. You know, if the 20th century is about credit, it's about advertising, it's about individual ownership, the 21st century is about reputation, it's about community, it's about sharing access. So collaborative consumption is the shift in consumer value from ownership to access. You know, using network technologies like internet, people can do more with less or no money, using renting, lending, swapping, bartering, gifting, sharing products or services on like such a massive scale, like the whole world is connected. And these are some notable examples. You might know some of them. Aalto has this Gussie service. And the reason why collaborative consumption only happened in the 21st century because there are three factors. The first one is there's a critical mass of idling capacities. Idling capacity is some resources that are untapped, underused. Basically, there are things that lie around your house that you don't use anymore. They are like these old things, and thanks to hyperconsumption, we have plenty of those. And once the number of these things, of this idling capacity, reach critical mass, or the number that is viable enough to create a big enough variety that for the marketplace, that people can actually use these resources instead of the old system in hyperconsumption. And when these idling capacities are connected through the internet, that's my version of internet, and then you have eBay. And so it's a big, big marketplace. And then how do you trust people from across the world? Then you have this social proof system. Like in eBay, when you're buying something from a buyer, then you would check their rating system, like, okay, has this buyer been good or bad? So the reputation on these services become the new credit, become your new credentials. Yeah, you know, collaborative consumption, it solves the hand drill problem. The hand drill problem is a problem that people, they want things done. They don't really want to own things. Many times you don't really want to own things. You just want things done. You don't want a hand drill. What you want are holes, right? You don't want a hand drill. And you know, like on average, hand drills gets used only 15 minutes through its lifetime, and the rest of the time it's just sitting there getting dusted in your storage area. So you know, people, not everyone wants a car. You just want to get from point A to point B. That's why there's a zip car, a car sharing service where you can just get in the car, use it, and then park it back at the same place. And you don't have to own it. And it's much, much cheaper than owning a car and pay for the parking space. Or if you want like the latest handbags, but you don't want to spend like thousands of euros, then we have bag borrow or steal, where you can just pay 10% of the original cost of the handbag, and you can have it for a period of time. If you want to go to you want to hang out with your high-class friends, you want to be like, hey, I'm in, I'm not out, so you just borrow these, and in 1 week you can return it, no problems. So this makes people more happy because you don't have to work so hard to buy all this stuff and own everything, and you don't have to take care of them. And the planet is more happy because you use much less natural resources. Lifespan of the product gets extended because it's in the cycle much longer before they ended up in the landfill. But yet, collaborative consumption, just like hyper consumption, also needs really good design in order to be successful. So that's how I arrived to the question: how can visual designers contribute to collaborative consumption services? So the second part is how I actually find out the answer to this question. So there are two things that I do, which is I dive deep into the collaborative consumption, I study case studies, and then actually try designing one. So in order to learn like the depth of these services. So I picked 5 famous case studies, which are Couchsurfing, Skillshare, Kickstarter, Autoliv, and Craigslist. You don't know like all of this, but that's okay. And I'm just gonna show you one example of the case study because time is limited. So the framework that I use to analyze these services, I approach it like as brands, because you cannot just pick one area of these services to analyze. You cannot just pick visual identity, you cannot just pick website design, you cannot just pick UI or UX. It's very holistic view, and branding has some kind of similar approach to this. So I look into Dr. Keller's model of customer-based brand equity, which analyze these assets in the brand that makes a good brand, and I adjusted a little bit so it become more appropriate for this purpose. So there are 6 areas that I look into each services, which are visual identity, usability, association, quality, social design, and user experience, which is at the top. So if we take Couchsurfing, for example, and if you go to the Couchsurfing website today, it looks already different. It's like, that's one nature of these kind of services. They change, they always change. So first part, I look at all the visual identity, I break it down into elements, do some analysis, like is it good, is it bad, is it like, and then do some mapping with a competitor, where does it stand? And then associations, like how do they portray themselves to the users? How do they see the users? What kind of images, what kind of photos do they use? Usability, I take a role of a user and then I do this cognitive walkthrough to all these functionalities in the website. And are they good? Is there any glitches? Are there any like bugs? So I keep doing all these tasks. And then there's social design aspect, like because in collaborative consumption, you really need users to keep coming back and using the service for it to keep running. So from being unaware of the service and to become a passionate user, like what steps users have to go through, and do these services facilitate these kind of things well. And then the quality of the service, I compare this to other close competitors. And then the user experience, which is like the most important thing, because as Martin Nomier, a brand guru, say that at the end, the brand is a person's gut feeling. What do you feel about the service? How do you live when you use it? What kind of experience do you get out of it? And these are like the keywords that I extracted from using Couchsurfing and through analysis. Right, so I do all that to all 5 services. I write down all the findings that I find and keep it there. And then I move on to actually designing a project, which I was fortunate because there was a client who actually won one of these services built during the time when I was doing the thesis. That project is called Cake Theory. Cake Theory is a crowdfunding service. It's a meeting place where, if you want to build a business, but you don't have money, and you don't want to go to banks to loan money or getting money from your friends, you can try to sell your future products or service to the people of the world. For example, if I want to open up a coffee shop and I need 10,000 euros, and that's my cake. The funding is a metaphor of the cake, and you can slice this funding into pieces in however number you want, and you sell these pieces to people. Like, hey, if somebody buys 2 pieces, and I promise them that once my coffee shop get open, they can come in and have 2 free coffees. So you sell your future stuff, and so this is a whole design process that I go through. First, I analyze the closest competitor being a Kickstarter, because it's also a crowdfunding service, and they're the biggest one, but they only focus on creative projects. But we want to extend it to other kind of business also, and being a little bit more serious, a little bit more like, we be in business. Analyze the site structure, and then I somehow make it a bit simpler, a bit more efficient for K-theory. Going through all the wireframe building, like what the website what should it contain in all the pages. Go through some branding. So for branding, what I did is like I create this character called Cake Man, and I find real life people who kind of can become, can be Cake Man. Like all these profiles, like what does he eat, where does he hang out, is he single, is he married, all that kind of things. And I went and I saw this TV show called The Dragon's Den, which is kind of like the feeling that I'm looking for. Like, yeah, this is good. So we use this as the profile when I was building the brand. And of course, the usual business, you start designing the logos, the identity, you go through all these sketches, more sketches. And yeah, I was even thinking like, hey, if it's on the website, maybe it's moving, the logo is moving, you can change it. Or maybe it's changeable every time you go to a new page, like the logo changes. And I arrived to the final design. So I cut the word cake to give it a sense of dividing, and more ways of cutting it, to make it more interesting. This is what it looks like in the final with the color. So like very serious, like business, and yeah, very professional looking. And I put that design on top of the wireframe, which I showed you earlier, and then we have the website. So some of the layouts. So, from learning that 5 case studies, combining with this designing cake theory, I collect all the findings, combine, arrange, and categorize them into lists of suggestions. And this list is the conclusion. It's the answer to my research question, which all the list is combined into this book, this guideline booklet. This is kind of the outcome of my thesis. And there are 3 things that I learned that visual designers can contribute to these services by first implementing holistic approach. Like I just said, you cannot just tackle this like in small details. You have to look at the big picture. You have to imagine like the customer journey, like how before they use the services, where do they come from, what kind of problems do they have, and when they use the service, what happened afterward? How do you keep them from keep coming back to use the service again, and how do you keep contact with them, and all that. The second part is that I create these 7-step guidelines in this booklet. The 7 steps are you should be learning the context, you should plan the project, you should ensure the performance, giving it the right face, associate with target audience, facilitate social interaction, and make sure that it's good quality and looks professional. And again, I'm not going to go through all the 7 steps because we don't have that time. And the 7 steps looks like this in timeline. Like if you begin designing here, then you see like all these steps. How do they connect them? And when do you start designing each of these steps? So I'm just going to give you an example of step 4, giving it the right face. And there are 5 things that I suggest when you're designing the face or the visual looks of these services. Is that they should be simple and they should be neutral. Why? Because if you go to a website like Craigslist, you see that the user content, you cannot control them, what they put it up on the site. So if your site looks already complex, or it has like, I don't know, green background or anything. It might not suit all the content that it push up there. So it should be simple, you should keep it simple, you should keep it neutral. And you should have to keep it consistent, because most of the time these services, they are super complex, like the site architecture is just enormous. And like the old Couchsurfing website, they suffer from this because, as you can see, like when you arrive at the dashboard, it has some kind of one look. When you go to the forum, looks like you landed on a different website, which is the problem, because they're trying to combine the new look to the old look. So yeah, this is one area that should be considered. Next is open and close. What it means is that how much freedom do you give to the users to modify their content that they put up on the services? For example, these are two projects in Kickstarter. You can see that they look different, but they control the typeface. It's always heretical new, and on the top is always videos. And of course, you can put any images you like, but you cannot put like fancy stuff like fonts or colors or just font sizes. You cannot change that. Kickstarter kind of control it. Whereas in Couchsurfing, what you can do is you can actually paste your HTML codes directly onto the website. So you can put on anything you want. Like comparing these two pages, they look completely different. Like on the right is my profile, and on the left is another guy in San Francisco, and it has all these fancy colors and all these kind of even little animations. The thing is, between close and open, you have to choose. Like if you want to be more open, it's meaning you are building something more social. You want the user to feel like they own the content, right? And if you're going for more close design, then it's more like, yeah, you don't really need to build the social aspect of it, which is fine. It depends on what kind of service you're going for. If it's car sharing service, of course, you don't need to build a community inside the website itself. You can do it in Facebook or other social medias. But in Couchsurfing, it is very, very important that the user feel like they are part of this society. They feel like they're part. They control the content. And the last, this number 4 is digital medium, because most of these services, they happen, on screens. And you have to take into consideration that maybe the visual identity doesn't have to be just fixed, like one as when we design prints. The logo can change. Like for example, this is a website about tourism in a town in Norway called Nordkun. And the logo changes depending on the weather of the day. So they collect this data, and the logo shifting according to the weather and like the season and all that stuff. So it's pretty neat. I try to do the same with Cake Theory. Like the logo can change, and every time the user comes, they see a new version. And of course, the web topography, very important, right, Saku? Yeah, you should consider this, because it's kind of the same as print typography, but it's actually very different also at the same time. The way it behaves, the way it renders on the screen is quite different. And I experienced myself, because when I was designing Cake Theory, first I chose Gotham as a typeface, and later I realized they don't have a web font version. So I was like, oh, that's a bummer. So I have to change the font into something else that work with the websites better. And the last thing is you have to push your boundary. That so this is the third category of the answer. I mean, as a designer, you have to not just, as a visual designer, it's not just stop there at your comfort area. You have to push further in order to be able to design these services. Yeah, coding is going to become a real standard of designers. That even though you cannot code yourself, you should understand how it works to communicate with developers. And of course, there are many other aspects like social interaction, how do you design, how to do marketing, social medias, and all that good stuff. So, I'm ending this presentation with a quote from Bruce Mao. He says that now that we, implying us designers, can do anything, basically what he's saying is like design is such a powerful tool that it can really shape the people's way of life, the people's ways of consumption, anything. And with this such powerful tool, what are we going to do with it? Are we going to keep on being on the same track in the hyperconsumption and drive the people and the planet off the cliff? Or should we turn around and change the direction of the people and go toward more sustainable path in consumption? And this guide basically is kind of like helping designers kickstarting the project, like what you should know and what can be done. And really, it's not a Bible. It's far from it. It's just like a first step, like kind of like a dummy guide to designing this collaborative consumption. So these two choices, I mean, the choice is yours, designers, and what are you going to do with such a powerful tool? Thank you.